Who is the person you hate the most in your life, and what did they do to earn that hatred? My husband's son. He grew up to be a child molester. He harmed one of his siblings. He has zero remorse for his victims. He's a master manipulator. He's a danger to any child he's allowed access to, and I do sincerely hate him. Story 2. My mother. A despicable, malignant narcissist who spent her entire life mentally, emotionally, and physically abusing me. She wrecked my life. Whilst I have put that chapter of my life to bed, I constantly think of the person I could have been without the upbringing I had. Story 3. My ex-husband's wife. He and I had 2 children together, both girls. We didn't have the best breakup, but we've learned to get along and be civil over the years. His wife has decided I am her enemy. She makes it her life's duty to make sure she looks better than me, and I suppose convinces herself that she is better than me. What makes me hate her, though, is not how she feels about me. It's how she treats my children. She is the evil stepmother. My girls dread going over to their dad's house anymore. He loves them, and I know he does. But she's there. She makes sure that they stay miserable, like her. She has no love in her heart. I can't officially or legally do anything because she doesn't hurt them physically. She's the only person I've ever met that I truly wish I could light on fire with my mind. If she were to tragically pass in an accident, I wouldn't mourn. Story 4. Might get hate for this, but can't help how I feel about it. My nephew is a 14-year-old who is autistic and has really bad neurological issues. Something about this combination causes him to become extremely violent and obsess over things. Like, for example, he will suddenly decide he wants to try and play video games, and when he's told no, he will have one of 2 reactions. 1. Ask every 5 minutes if he can play video games, which gets annoying, but eventually he pushes and never stops asking why. It's not the worst thing, but damn is it annoying. 2. He will get extremely upset, start hyperventilating, and then become violent. This has caused him to hit my sister and break her nose, give her bruises and cuts, do the same thing to her husband, and threaten to kill himself. My sister and her husband have had to call the police multiple times because of how violent my nephew gets, but there's nothing they can really do, apparently. My sister is at the point of trying to find a place for him in patient care, but it's extremely difficult to find spots for him. I keep being told by family and people that he can't control his actions and doesn't understand what he is doing, but I really don't see it that way. And of course, I'm no expert, but some things he will say make me feel like he knows how to not react violently, such as, "Go ahead and call the police. I'll act fine by the time they get here." Family gatherings? They all suck when he's around. He doesn't get violent there, but just waits until he gets home and starts attacking my sister and her family. Birthdays? Not about the person whose birthday it is anymore. When he's around, he makes damn sure he's the important person. Vacations? Don't even get me started. I've been told I shouldn't hate him because it isn't his fault, but I know 100% this family would be safer and much, much happier if he wasn't the way he was, and I can't help it, but I hate him. Story 5? This guy Jeff. Long story, but the bastard screwed both of my wives, 10 years apart. Ida. Originally, we were best friends. My first wife cheated with him, and that was it. I got divorced and cut them out of my life. Years on, I was still really bitter and angry, understandably. But friends and shrinks and anger management all told me, if you want to get better, you have to forgive. So I did. But my mistake was letting him back into my life. He sold me the idea he was really sorry, and obviously nothing like that would ever happen again. We were friends again. 10 years on, I fell in love and got married again. Took me 3 years to see it, but they were really close. Turns out, they were the whole time. The second time, I really got out of hand and went to jail. For all his skill at screwing wives, Jeff was no fighter. Story 6? I want to promote my girlfriend's father to missing person. He kicked her out of his vehicle and abandoned her on the side of the road. He was physically abusive to her and her brothers nearly every time he is at an event, like kids' sports. He tries to start Schmidt. And the reason my girlfriend's mom divorced him is because he violently beat her with a tennis racket and was arrested for. Story 7. My ex-husband. I found out when I was 9 months pregnant with our second that he was smoking crack and cheating on me with other married men. Because he is a millionaire, he went to rehab and did everything he could to discredit me. He drives around in a supercar and barely sees his children while I work 2 jobs to make ends meet and raise them. I have so much resentment for him. It's unreal. Story 8. University stalker. He was a Schmitty roommate, and then he was a pretty Schmitty stalker, because I knew it was him. The Raz knew it was him, and he was caught immediately after he actually did something. But it still ducked me up 12 years and counting. Story 9. I had a self-appointed boss from another department who told his new boss he was in charge of me. Dude was gaslighting me for 3 months. Would yell at me for random things, try to get me to work unpaid over time, wrote me a bad review when I didn't work a week past my contract. He asked for my ID, then threw it out the window as a joke. I was already under a ton of stress because I was looking for a new job because everyone was quitting. I'm glad I didn't do anything, but if I ever saw that dude in a parking lot, there would be one less asshole in the world. Story 10. There are very, very few people that I can truly say I have hated. Disliked? Sure, but hated? There's really just one. An old boss I had. Dan, going back to 2018. The year started off great. The previous year, I had met this incredibly awesome woman. We were engaged. We had a baby on the way. Mid-January, I got a call that my dad suddenly passed away. I won't get into that history, but he and I did not get along, and I had not seen him for well over a decade at that point. I still needed to go to the funeral, though. I put in for my 3 days of bereavement leave at work. So Dan threw a fit about it, saying it was too inconvenient. And couldn't my dad and I just reschedule the funeral? WTF? No. I was annoyed, but not mad. I chalked it up to Dan being a squirrely, insensitive airhead again. And once I replied that I'll have to call the funeral home and see if they can paste Dad's ashes back together and reanimate his corpse so that I can ask him to die at a more convenient time, it finally sunk into Dan's little peanut brain. Fast forward to July. My now 7 months pregnant fiance and I flew out of state to visit her family. I only had a long 3-day weekend, so I had to catch an early flight home on the last day while she stayed behind for the rest of the week. 2 hours after flying home, I was back at work. 2 hours after that, I got frantic phone calls from the fiance's family. Something had happened. She was in the hospital, losing a lot of blood. They have to do an emergency C-section, and it wasn't looking good. Our baby survived for 8 minutes, 23 seconds before she was gone. Doctors couldn't save her. For weeks on end, Dan's favorite thing after that was dead baby jokes and constant snarky haha, good thing your baby died and saved you money comments. Dan denied any kind of Loa for me. I lost my kid. I almost lost my fiance, but it didn't matter to him. He wanted me there to laugh at with more dead baby jokes. End of September came and my fiance offed herself. Dan switched from dead baby jokes to unending comments like, "How much do you suck as a person that everyone would rather die than be around you?" It wasn't until my attorney sent some threatening notices to him in the corporate office that Dan finally shut his mouth, eventually getting fired a few months later for unrelated reasons, followed by his parents suddenly getting sick and dying and his wife getting a cancer diagnosis. Call that karma if you want. Story 11. My wife's ex-husband, because of the way he treated her and my stepson. I'll never tell a soul in real life, but I wouldn't piss on him if he was on fire. I'd stand there and laugh at the Story 12. My ex-husband. He lied, constantly, cheated, sexually, and stole from me, demanded 1/2 of my paycheck, and in general was a self-important moron who thought he was smarter than everyone else. Karma helped kill him as well as his own idiot choice to not listen to docs where his diabetes and heart issues were concerned. It's been a peaceful 5 years for our son, and because we don't have to endure his abuse. Story 13. Old ex's mom. I've never seen anyone genuinely hate their own child so much. So much so that this kid is forever traumatized and will never see their own worth. The person I loved more than life itself completely shredded to a pile of trauma and self-loathing because of his own mother. Not only that, but she ripped us apart and pulled his future out from underneath him as means of power plays. That's not the kind of hate that can go away. I've never experienced the kind of anger I feel watching a child be destroyed because their parent hates them. Story 14. My Mill. She's just a vile woman, a boy mom, but a failure of one. She's hateful. Every woman but her is evil. She's hated every single woman any of her 5 sons have brought home. None of them talk to her except the one who never moved out. She's a failure of a mother. All her children hate her. They all have completely flat heads, and all recall never having a mother there for them the way a mother should. My husband talks to her sometimes, but went low contact when I got pregnant because even though I was doing exactly what my doctor told me, I did everything wrong. I was evil and willing to murder my child because I simply could not afford to stay home during my pregnancy. This woman has never had a job, so she doesn't understand the economy. All JER bills are paid for by the government. When I was in labor, she shat on me because I had the epidural. My daughter was damn near 9 pounds. Of course I want the epidural. But what made me tell my husband to keep that away from me was while I was in active labor for 17 hours asterisk. She decided that her poor son was getting to see real birth because I had the epidural, so she told us, "I hope you get to see your next woman give real birth." And then she proceeded to throw a massive pitch fit 2 hours after I gave birth because we told her we were not packing up our newborn and flying Thai sit in her apartment. We later, after all this happened, found out that they are anti-vaxxers and currently have COVID, but they wanted us to take me newborn down there. I asked her to apologize, and her story changed twice. First time, she never said that. I'm just evil. I'm making things up, like all women do. Then, when my husband called her out and informed her that asterisk, he heard her say it, asterisk, well now I'm just butterhurt and making G mountains out of molehill. I told her she's gonna be real but hurt when she never meets my daughter, ever. And I told my husband if he goes behind my back and introduces his anti-vax crazy mother to my child, I will file for divorce immediately and do everything in my power to get custody. We've been together forever. I've never threatened him about anything, for anything. I'm usually, we can sit and talk it out wife, but for that, Absolutely not. Thankfully, my husband has a backbone and isn't like a lot of these useless men on Reddit, you know, the ones I'm talking G about. There's a different post about them every day, and has backed me up from the beginning and is absolutely appalled at his mother. I'm not a hate-fuck person by any means. I'm typically one of those annoying anything is possible with the power of love and friendship people, but I hate her. Story 15. My dad, he's an evil psychopath who gave me a seizure on the phone last time he was drinking whiskey and threatening to find me and kill me because I was too pussy to assault the people who are bullying me in a bad gang neighborhood. He's a GOP piece of Schmidt, and he's obsessed with Trump too. Dude thinks a black belt he got 30 years ago still makes him invincible today, and his 9-foot-tall bulletproof persona goes so deep that he is now losing all his teeth because he has bad teeth hygiene, which is weird because the dude, Showers Lamau Schmidt's so weird how he always has designer sunglasses and a $500 watch on. But I watched his teeth rot out over the past decade, and now I'm pretty much no contact. My last message to him was something like, when he scares his current fiancée, ain't no one gonna take care of him next time. Because he looks like a scary meth head now. Dude is gonna end up in a state-owned mental ward for the old lol. He's delusional anyway. He literally admitted to me without directly admitting it that he wants an autocracy last time I was no contact with him. He was frothing at the mouth in glee, describing how funny it was for nightclub shooting victims to be running away from an active shooter. And he described some situation in such vivid detail when he spoke about some cross-dressers' heels breaking while fleeing from active shooters. I actually lost it and started screaming at him that he's a psychopath, evil piece of Schmidt. This time it was because he threatened to come find me and start Schmidt with everyone where I live, said he was gonna show up on his motorcycle with 45s strapped to shoulder holsters and start having talks with people because no one talks to his son like that. Then we started screaming at each other. And when I told him I didn't want him ruining my future, he said I was a pussy piece of Schmidt liberal and started screaming how he'd kill me instead. Then a day later, he threatened to kill me. Wow. I actually had a seizure from the Atris because of my own mental problems, probably caused by a Schmidt family growing up. This dude is so duck and psycho that I had 2 assault charges by age 10 because he used me to instill fear in others, teaching me how to fight as a kid. He has kicked me out of my own home as a child more than once to make me fight people waiting outside the door. Dude tried to make bets with other piece of Schmidt parents on whose kids would win fights, and Schmidt in the slums of Appalachia a couple decades ago. This is the type of dude who will call a police officer and make threats to them for sport and make your driving ticket you got ducked over on orders of magnitude worse than act like it was all your fault when he couldn't even take you to court. This dude probably deserves to be shot, TBH. I'm not even a liberal, and this dude has actually made me hate the joke. Story 16. An old client of mine, I left that job and haven't talked with her in probably 3-4 years now and never will again. She was the worst human and absolute bully to everyone around her. You know, the stereotypical Karen. So take that attitude, double it, then direct it at everyone she comes into contact with. She used to regularly send me multiple emails insulting me, call to scream at me, call me the most horrible names, and threaten to sue me for every little thing, then act confused as to why I didn't want to work with her. When I finally had enough and said I was done, and she was blacklisted from the agency because nobody else would take her, she made multiple reports to the county, state, and my workplace that I wasn't doing my job, lied about a whole bunch of stuff. I had the good sense to stop doing phone calls and keep mostly everything either over email or with someone else present so I was able to back up everything I did, but she was determined to destroy my career. She threatened to fire me constantly and was furious when I told her that's up to her and she can absolutely do that if she wants. She never did. Every time she threatened to sue me, I asked if she needed help finding legal resources. That also really pissed her off because I think she was under the impression that I would beg her not to, or if she fired me, I would be fired from my company. In reality, if she had fired me, it would have just made my job a lot easier and more peaceful. Lol. She would scream at contractors and insult them then when they would resign and refuse to work with her because of her behavior. She would explode at them and then at me because somehow everything was still my fault. I was hiring people to help at her home and actually ran out of agencies because she had either fired or been banned from so many due to being a straight-up bitch. She also never took any responsibility. I remember one contractor said they would not be doing the job because they didn't work with people who insulted their workers. She denied ever insulting them, so he forwarded emails that she had sent calling him all kind of names. And she had the balls to try to gaslight him into thinking "you're an incompetent idiot" wasn't meant to be an insult, and he was dumb for even thinking it was. I could go on forever about the things she did. I had days where I would get so stressed dealing with her that I would have to step away. I would go for a walk and just picture her getting hit by a bus. Story 17. I never had a father growing up. He was an abusive alcoholic who visited every few years pretending to care about his kids. But this post isn't about him. My mom's good friend never had kids, always wanted them. but never ended up finding the one and settling down. My whole childhood, he was my father. He told people we were his kids. It was almost as if we had separated parents who were the ideal separated parents. We saw him every weekend. He took us back to school shopping when my mom struggled financially. He was my dad. When I was 15, he had a heart attack, was in IQ. He wasn't with it. We sat there for a couple weeks with him every minute of every day, until his mother showed up. He hasn't talked to her since before I was born. I don't know their history, but I had never met her my whole life. Because he was young and never made a will or anything, she was the next of kin. She obviously had a great deal of regret and couldn't deal with her own demons, so she took it out on us. She started screaming at me that it was my fault he was in here and banned us from seeing him. He went from being surrounded by friends and loved ones in ICU to having only one visitor, someone he hasn't seen in over a decade. We tried to sneak in to visit hoping she wouldn't be there, but she was and told the hospital we weren't allowed to visit him. One nurse was heartbroken watching this all uneffed and let us know her visiting schedule so we could sneak in when she wasn't there. I went every morning before school and before bed after that. He passed a few weeks later, obviously while she was there, not me. She took his body after he passed, and to this day, 18 years later, I have never been able to visit his grave, if he has one. He could have been cremated or brought back to her country to be buried. Every year near his passing, I have a coffee at the Tim Hortons he used to frequent with his other friends after work. It's where I can feel his presence. I don't like the word hate. I don't even hate my own biological father, who was an abusive, but I hate that with all my heart. Story 18. My father. I could go on and on about all the Schmidt he's done in my life, but here's what broke the camel's back. Me, at the time, 17F, about to go to college, at a water park with my father. I have a conversation with two adults while on the line of a water slide, and we talk about video games. I'm going to college to be a game developer. And afterwards, he compliments me on how well I spoke to them. I have ADHD, and I'm hoping to be tested for ASD. And because of this, my dad has always believed that I was stupid. He'd never say it, but the stuff he did always implied it. This, of course, is false. I am literally quantifiably much smarter than him in terms of IQ. Later, we're on another ride. I take this time to inform my father of something he's often inconsistent with. Child support. I tell him, hey, just so you know, when I turn 18, you still have to pay child support until I'm 21 as long as I am a full-time student. Or you can go file a petition with the court to get the amount changed if you're having money problems. He goes, okay. Thanks. I'll be sure to remember that. And then he stops paying after my 18th birthday. He has now fled to Florida and is living with my grandmother. Has failed to show up to court 3 times, which caused the courts to rule in my mom's favor, and has had his license taken away. However, we know he's still driving because a while back, he and my brother downloaded tracking apps to know where the other is for baseball and being picked up from baseball and stuff like that. And this dumbass of a grown man forgot to delete it. We see him lying, and I cannot wait for the day he goes to prison. There's a ton of other stuff like that. One time he got mad at me for voicing why he made me upset outside of a restaurant. And that other time he tried to say I was lying in front of my therapist. And that other time when I was like 6, that he threw me into a wall for spelling the word duck. But this post is too long already. Story 19. My ex-stepdad, I was 16. In the beginning, he always gave me a 20 and was like, "You're a good girl." I always took the money because duck ya. But then I told my mom that it feels like it buttered me up. He got mad. He was obsessed with money. Like to the point where he would sit at the computer for hours and look at his bank account. He was financially and verbally abusive to my mom. And I tried many times to get rid of me and drive a wedge between my mom and I told my dad once, you know, she loves you more than me. All my dad could do was laugh in his face. Anything I did wasn't good enough. I was going to college during 2008 to 2009, so the recession sucked. I was going to school full-time and I wasn't working. He told me I was lazy. There was a semester where I legit couldn't find a job. I remember driving down all the main streets and just handing in applications after applications, and he called me lazy for not finding a job. I threw a knife at him when he berated me over and over when I throw pasta sauce with some meat. His go-to story was how he grew up super poor that his mom had to cook the cat to eat. He took advantage of my mom's coast house that my grandpa put in her name when he died and shared it with her sister. He demanded to be on the deed, but my mom actually put her foot down. She divorced him, but a few years later, he got cancer and roped my mom into him, because my mom has a heart and always helps. After a few months, he told her, "I feel better. I don't need you anymore. My new girlfriend and her kids love me. Brenna never loved me." His girlfriend was a crackhead, and he never realized. He was a reformed alcoholic and went to meetings 2 a day. My mom told him, "You are going to die alone in 2020. My mom got called from hospice or a hospital that he wanted her there. She told the nurse, "Tell that ducker that I hope he dies and that I'm focusing on my daughter's wedding." So he got his karma. He died alone. Story 20. The abuser in my family. He was the cause for 3 generations of serious mental health issues. Our lives were filled with emotional neglect, physical and emotional aggression, humiliation, and much more. To this day, He still denies doing anything that he's accused of by several people, claiming that everyone's plotting against him and that he's done nothing but good. It took me a long time to cut contact with him, thanks to having to protect some people from him, and also thanks to the manipulation of others. But I finally took that step, and it was the best decision I've ever made so far. My mental health is healing so fast now that sometimes I don't recognize myself. I feel all these decades of fear finally leaving me in peace, and I've been able to focus on building beautiful memories instead of letting the pain and scars continue to define me. I can coldly say that now we're only waiting for him to die, so that we can take care of things and honor my grandmother the way she always deserved. Story 21. My neighbor, I tried many times to just ignore, but him always putting his TV on freaking news channel or some movies tremendously loud that my son wakes up from it. You can't have a quiet night at home because it's always his freaking TV on the background. I've asked him many times nicely and eventually called the police, but nothing ever changed. And at times he's even doing it on purpose. Like my son goes to sleep and then all of a sudden his TV goes way louder. Absolute piece of boomer schmite. Story 22. My mother. The very worst thing that she did to me as a child was tell me that I had mental issues because she was a narcissist. I did not know this until many, many years later. She dismissed my feelings and made me feel small and insignificant. She never heard my complaints about her treatment of me. Small story. When I was 16 years old, I committed suicide. I woke up in hospital. The nurse sitting next to me told me that I had been dead for about 2 minutes. She then told me that my mother had attempted to put a DNR on me. Because I was a minor without a chronic illness, they would not let her. The nurse was not supposed to tell me. She felt I should know. I am ever grateful to that nurse. CPS was never called. She also told me that I was too fat to wear what the pretty girls wear. When shopping for swimsuits one year, it wasn't until I saw the look on another customer's face that I understood. This was not okay to say to me. She worked with autistic children and blatantly ignored my signs. I am autistic, diagnosed 3 years ago. She disbelieved me when I told her I was roped by the man across the street until school counselor called the police and I told them. She neglected me and physically tried to kill me in the bathtub when I was 4, I think. She told me that no one on my grandmother's side wanted to see me. She and my dad both told me that no one on my stepdad's side of the family cared that I existed. She has made it clear that even as an adult, I'm not welcome to be part of her family. I know this because she blatantly does not invite me to things. Now that my son is old enough to go on his own, she took really good care of me when I was pregnant. But when my son was born, started caring less about me the older I got. There's a lot more than this, but these are the key ones. Story 23, my sister. She actually me when I was aged 5 till 12 and she's 5 years my senior. My brain had blocked it out and I went to see a very good psychologist, and during a session trying to find the cause of my anger issues, my brain accidentally let me remember it all. Hectic session. Lifetime of hatred. Dumb has now moved to Cairns, thinking she can just forget what she did to me. While she's enjoying yoga, MTB riding, and running a half-arsed attempt at a website business, I'm dealing with being triggered by a variety of things and constantly want revenge. Story 24, my old boss. He treated everyone so disrespectfully and degraded coworkers in front of other coworkers. I still have PTSD from how he treated me and my coworkers. So I put in my notice, and when our team heard about it, they all put in their notice. HR and C-suite had a panic attack and brought all of us in for exit interviews and to investigate. I've never seen it happen in corporate America. But after they met with everyone, they fired him and gave me his job. I assumed they would close ranks and just let us go and protect him, but they did the opposite. It was the greatest revenge I could possibly think of. I still hate the bastard, but now I have his job and make a Schmidt ton of money doing his job 100 times better than him. Story 25. An ex-friend in secondary school, Jay, who all of a sudden decided to not want to be close with me anymore. We used to be a group of 4, but one of us was put into another class between the 2nd and 3rd year, ages 13, 14. So it was me and the 2 others. They apparently thought I was weird and a witch. I played D&D, they were both Christian, so they decided to shut me out. We still sat together, the 4 of us at lunch, but in class, I was alone and miserable. At the end of the year, one of the 2, Elle, came back to me, told me that Jay had pretty much abandoned her as well and asked to be friends with me again. She admitted she had been a bitch and was just being a stupid teenager, which sounded genuine to me, so I forgave her. Jay never said anything to that extent. I think she still thinks she was in the right back then. Honestly though, seeing that middle school drama is still my biggest source of hatred makes me really grateful about the rest of my life. Story 26. My ex-cousin, at the time she was 20 and I was 22 for context. She was such a miserable person, jealous of everything I had in life. She tried to seduce my husband, and when he wouldn't sleep with her, she went off the deep end and took a bunch of pills, Klonopins, and called me at work saying she wanted to go to my house, where he was, and wait for me to get off work. When I said no, her voice changed to this demonic-sounding voice, and she said, "I'm gonna kill," my husband's name, "I'm gonna duck him up," and hung up on me. I called her back, and she started screaming at me and ran off the road, through a fence, into a field, and almost hit a tree. I called her mom and grandparents to tell them she may be hurt somewhere, and they got her to the ER where they pumped her stomach. She spent a week in the psych ward, and when she got out, I tried to still be friends because she's family, but one day shortly after that, I was riding in the car with her, and she was crying about how I have friends and she doesn't. And then she got angry about it and floored the gas pedal and sent us flying down a long driveway. I yanked the e-brake up before we hit a power pole. I don't know how the car didn't flip, but I'm lucky to be alive. She's a menace and is now unhappily married to my husband's ex-best friend, and they have 2 kids. I feel sorry for her kids, but I gotta say it feels great knowing how unhappy she is and that her husband cheats on her constantly. Story 27. A teen who roped my daughter, also a teen at the time, who got a slap on the wrist because he was a minor and because he pleaded guilty to slipping her the roofie and having his way with her. I hate him with every cell in my body and wish horrible things on him. Story 28. Abusive father left the family while his children were 12, 7, and 2. Mom killed herself because he had fully brainwashed her into believing she needed him to survive. 12-year-old brother took over the family and became extremely abusive in his own right, more mentally than physically. He died when he was 18, I was 13. And my sister was 8. We went to the police. They figured out we had an aunt that we could have gone to the whole time. Enter Great Aunt Shelley, got homeschooled by her for a year and went to high school. Best decision I ever made. I met the love of my life when I was 14. We're both 19 now, and we still both cry over where the red fern grows. When I was 16, the police officer that helped us find Aunt Shelley called me and said a man that matched my father's description had shown up in an investigation. He was found in a motel on the edge of town with a bullet aimed carefully through his carotid artery and into the brain. You may ask how one achieves that angle in a surprise attack. It's suspected that he committed suicide. Definitely my father, no doubt about it. On a happier note, my little sister is about to start high school and Grant Shelley is doing well. My girlfriend is on the couch rewatching The Owl House for the millionth time. Story 29. The husband of a colleague in my law firm. About 15 or 16 years ago, the apartment above our office had a problem and water was dripping from the ceiling. Office was brand new at that point. We had been there for a few months. No expenses spared. It was Saturday evening, and luckily someone was still there when it started and alerted everyone. We rushed in and started putting buckets everywhere to stop the water from flooding everything and damage the sockets, etc. I was there, my wife was there, my wife's parents, who had nothing to do with it, rushed in to help. This colleague came in with her husband, and she of course started doing her part. Not her husband. He didn't move a finger. He was there, chilling, with his arms crossed, relaxed as duck. He looked at me and said, "It's really coming down, isn't it?" But didn't move a finger while everyone else was frantically trying to minimize damage. I have never hated someone so much and likely never will. There have been people in my loaf that have tried to duck me over for much worse. But I don't hate them half as much as a guy who saw people struggling and didn't do Schmidt when it would have cost him nothing. Story 30. Used my job as a doctor as an excuse to kidnap my stepson when my country was locked down during COVID and the family courts were closed, so my husband was powerless to do anything. He didn't see his son for months. I was considered a vulnerable worker due to respiratory illnesses and wasn't allowed near any patient who could have even possibly had COVID. But despite this, my job was used to hurt my stepson and hurt my husband. I changed careers. I had studied my entire life to become a doctor. It was my dream, but there was every chance this could happen again, and I refused to allow that. It also changed my enjoyment of the job. I don't want to put in writing how I feel about my stepson's egg donor, but I'm willing to bet you can guess. The worst part, that isn't even the worst thing she's done since then. The list is huge and growing. Story 31. A guy at my last job. I won't call him a coworker, because he rarely worked. He lied to me, to customers, to reps, and to the boss, and always got away with it. He spent his time in his office vaping, eating, organizing his Civil War reenactment events, Confederate, and doing Tea Party politics. He made $1,000 a week as a salesman, and I made $12 an hour as the secretary. He cheated on his wife, and I am 100% convinced he was a white supremacist. He is running for a political office this year and will probably win. Story 32. Well, I have tons of people I hate, but the Hall of Fame goes to Kevin, my high school colleague Kevin. He's the type of guy to just treat you nicely if he wants something, or if you're in girl he wants. I'm one of the class leaders of sort, which is kind of a big deal, but not much, and he is one too. Bro not only don't take me in consideration to take any decision, does stuff alone without talking to me and, well, other basic douche stuff, but he also does not really see me as an equal. I started to notice that he does not talk to me addressing really to me. Kind of hard to understand, I know, but here's a real example that really happened. The principal told us to come to his room. He came and he started to talk about a situation involving a student that I wasn't aware of, because he does not tell me Schmidt Lowell. And Kevin proceeded to say, "Hey, principal, can I ask to my name leave the room for a moment?" Like, not even looking to me to say, and I hate it. "Oh, but this is small, it doesn't matter. It's 1,000 of these small stuff that makes me hate people." Story 33, my sister, but I'm not sure if it's actually hate or just a deep seething dislike. My dad passed away when I was 24, I'm now 40. She would have 26, now 42. She went off the deep end, not sure if it was an attention thing or what, but we live in the same small town, population 6,500, and I haven't seen her for almost 4 years. She has 5 kids and I have 3, but none of them know each other due to the wedge my sister has driven between her and our mother, thusly my family and hers. I've tried to get her side of things, but in the end my decision and outcome is the same. My sister is a twat and refuses to talk to my mother over something that is so talkable to fix remedy. Her husband is a pushover and won't help or do anything to try and help get our family back together. I miss my sister and would love to get to know my nephews and niece. The last 3 kids she's had I've found out about through people I see maybe 3 times a year. Story 34. Had a neighbor. He used to touch me. I didn't realize I was being abused until I was like 13. I didn't do anything about it. Just avoided that guy like a plague from then on. He broke his leg very badly once. Was happy. Story 35. My mother and her abusive boyfriend. They threatened to kill my cats and left my mom and me outside in sub-zero weather, where I almost developed hypothermia. He once held a knife to my mother's neck. As a child, he forced me to sleep in my own urine when I cried out of fear. When I gave my mother a choice between me and him, she chose him. After I went to live with my dad, she told me she hoped I would kill myself and that I was a terrible son. When I tried to rebuild our relationship, she manipulated me, convincing me it was all my fault, and I attempted numerous times to end it. But as I grew older, she realized her manipulation wasn't working anymore. I'm now 22 and still dealing with the trauma. I'm going to start childhood trauma therapy soon, but my mother has made it clear she doesn't want a relationship with me and has since cut me off entirely. I'm okay with that, but the trauma has left me with constantly shaky hands, making everyday tasks like holding my food and doing delicate things a nightmare. Story 36. My parents. They abused me emotionally, financially, and were an overall hindrance in my life. Mom was also a drug addict, and I saw her at multiple times. It got to the point where even though I knew she was owing, I just let it happen wishing she'd die and feigning stupidity afterwards. Dad is well crazy. He believes he's the prophet of God and has a Tehran that's so messed up from citations it's falling apart. It's been about 6 years almost, since I left abruptly to go to a Job Corps without telling them. It was the best decision I could ever make because they saved my life. I was at the brink of wanting to kill myself due to my environment. But I am finally out, and well damn, I am doing good. I have contacted them since and I don't have any plans to. Story 37. My mom's current partner was my dad's best friend for a few years, then decided to tune up duck my mom. She's at fault as much as him, I guess. Ruined a family of 9 at a young age. Story 38. My partner's ex. She sent their kid over when they both had flu and I was high-risk prego. She lied. Kid was still sick. I had flu less than 48H later. It was very rough and I was very sick. Baby is fine. But yeah, she knew. Story 39. My mother-in-law, sister-in-law, and my former school principal. I hate my mother-in-law because we lived with her for about a year and a half, and in that time, we became very close. Some things happened that would take too long to explain. But basically, she put on a facade that made me believe that my husband was overreacting when speaking about his past trauma from her. She is not a good mom and not a good person. I hate my sister-in-law because she constantly disrespects me. Straw that broke the camel's back. We're TTC and she just got pregnant and had the audacity to make a joke calling herself Fertile Myrtle. My former principal is my old boss. She had me transferred from the school BC. I worked a field trip that required me to work an extra 4 hours after school. She only wanted to pay me for 2. So I had security roll back the cameras. I was placed on administrative leave the next day. Story 40, old classmate. Once I found a spider in the choir room, so I picked him up and put him outside through our side door. She got up, went outside, and stomped him to death. I also hate her mom and dislike her sister. Her sister was just but on a class trip to Disney, I'd put my bags on the compartment above my bus seat like we were supposed to. Her mom was a chaperone. She came over to underscore my underscore seat, which was across the aisle, and rose away, took my stuff out and set it on the chair and put her stuff in it while I was off the bus saying goodbye to my mom. When I got back and saw, I just grabbed her Schmidt and threw it on her seat and put mine back. She never said anything but glared daggers at me. She didn't speak or look at me the whole trip. Bunch of selfish, uppity I tell you. Story 41, my father. He never works. Asks us money for his cigarettes, hurts our pets at home to gain reactions from us, slams everything at home, and still has the audacity to blame us for his schmitty life. Worst of all, he acts nicely when he's outside our home. Only our neighbors know about how he is at home, but thankfully, my youngest sibling will now go to university, and all of us will be living away from home. I hate him for making me hate staying at home. I hate him for making me easily scared of loud sounds. I hate him for emotionally torturing us through 20-plus years, and above all, I hate him for threatening us that he'll kill our pets. A 6-year-old cat and a 2-year-old dog. He thinks I'm studying law to save his ass. I'm motivated to study well to save my family, and we will wholeheartedly choose to save or care a puppy we barely know over you any time in this lifetime. Story 42. It takes as much energy to hate someone as it does to love someone. However, ambivalence, aka not giving AF $K, requires no energy and frees up effort for more important things. Choose ambivalence. Story 43. I met the one, my one. I knew it as him from the day I met him. We dated, and things are perfect. A few weeks later, he held my face in his hands and very close to his eyes, looked me in my eyes, and told me that he really likes me. And 3 days later, no explanation, nothing. Stopped talking to me. He threw me aside like a used tissue, manipulated and destroyed me. I reached out after a while asking why he did what he did. He said, "You were perfect. I honestly don't know. I just woke up one day and don't like you anymore." I hate him. Story 44. A former coworker of mine who I was cordial to but not friends with stalked my social media until she found something she could use to try to get me fired. She put me through months of hell and I suffered a breakdown. I kept my job, with no repercussions other than an exhaustive investigation process. But man, did it do a number on my mental health, and I seriously contemplated taking my own life on a number of occasions. Even after I left, a few months later, she had one of her flying monkeys badmouth me to my new workplace to get me fired at my new job. Apparently, she was upset because I was friends with her best friend and wanted to teach me a lesson. If you are out there, Emily, I sincerely hope you have a long life filled with suffering. Duck you! Story 45. My ex-boss. She fired me in May of 2020 since COVID closed down my son's daycare. She lied and said it was a performance issue. But I had worked there 9.5 years with 90 pages of stellar reviews, including 160 days prior to being fired. I managed an IT department and could have done it remote, but she didn't believe in COVID at the time and wanted me in a room with people unmasked. She knew both my son and I have asthma. It ruined me wanting to work in that field again, which is sad since I spent 15 years earning 3 degrees for that type of work in public service. Fonda, you can go fuck yourself and I'll dance on your grave. Edit. Forgot to add that I won my unemployment case as I was able to provide enough evidence to show she lied. Cindy and Dee and Har can go to hell too. Story 46. When my dad died, there was a woman that he requested to be the one to host his memorial service. She was important to him, and I really wanted to like her. The best I can describe her is that she was so aggressively unpleasant that I had to second guess every point that I agreed with her on, which were quite a few, politically, religiously, the way we saw the world and more. At best, I was never happy to have had an interaction with her, and she would fairly routinely ruin my day. Now, if I ever see her in a discussion, it has been 100% reliable to just assume whatever side she was arguing was the wrong side. She is so reliably wrong and terrible that I can use it to help me find my own areas of blindness and missing knowledge and correct them, and so become a better person. Story 47. Friend of mine got kextorted years ago. He wasn't in the best place mentally and thought he had met someone whom he hit it off with on Reddit. He sent her some naked pictures only for someone to text him screenshots saying they would share them with friends and family if they didn't pay to have them deleted. In a panic, he paid around $3K only for them to up the demand for $20K. He took his own life a few days later. I sincerely hope those people suffer in the worst way possible, physically and mentally, without any offer of salvation. Story 48. I was a brand new teacher who got paired with an experienced teacher to work in the co-teaching model. The teacher I was with was known for being a hard ass. During a class party, she went to find something on her desk. I never touch a teacher's desk. She couldn't find it. In front of all the parents and kids, she screamed at me and then shoved every single item off her desk. She told me to pick it up because I was worthless to have in the classroom. I was timid and mortified, so I did it. I reported it to admin and nothing happened. I broke contact, $500, and left. She ended up at the same school as a para a few years later. I secretly loved her demotion and all of the things that came with it. Story 49. Ugh, my brother's off and on again girlfriend. From faking multiple pregnancies and miscarriages, climbing in his window, drunk and hitting him, and the worst, standing by his side at the hardest funeral we'd ever been to. We thought, okay, she's here for him. Awesome. But no, she was cheating and moved out and married the other dude the next day. Literally, the next day. Ugh, she's the worst. She divorced and will not leave him alone. He won't get a restraining order, so a lot of it is his fault to keep going back. He doesn't love her. He'll never marry her. Oh, and that gave my 14-year-old a dirty look since he took her to a football game instead of sitting with her. Oh, I get so fired up about this and it's barely scratching the surface. Real definition of dumb. Story 50. Guy I know roped a minor. He's also a narcissistic sociopath with a theft habit. The rope victim didn't want to come forward. Apparently nobody can do anything based on my hearsay. Now he teaches children. I tipped off the school he's at, and I'm now a social pariah for trying to ruin this guy's life. marriage, and teaching career. What I hate is that this guy has definitely ruined one person's life, maybe more, and is in a position to do it again very easily. It sucks that my trying to do the right thing has backfired, but that's secondary to the genuine trauma of his real victims. Basically, duck that guy and all the pieces of Schmidt who lined up to support him and get me exiled from my community for being a SJW, which I'm not, I just hate child rapists. Story 51. My husband's former boss. He has ruined my perception of Asian Indians forever. He was hired several years after my husband, different skill area. Long story short, he ended up as CEO, made promises of part ownership, etc., etc. Then started the "you don't fit my long-term management style" for the company, came right out and said he was too old, mid-50s. Fired him after over 30 years at the company, checked into age discrimination. An attorney wouldn't take it, but did write a letter. State EOC wouldn't touch it. Appealed to the federal EOC, and they went to bat for him. This CEO sent them several letters, each time justifying the firing for a different reason. Eventually, we went through mediation and received a settlement, and the best part, the entire company had to attend an 8-hour training about discrimination in the workplace. Story 52. At this moment, Donald Trump, for real, I hate this dude with all my guts. Won't say he is evil, but he is so unbelievably stupid and narcissistic. He is really dangerous and could be the cause for the worst things to happen. World War III. End of American democracy and final nail in the coffin for the environment. Story 53. One of my friends from primary school, let's call him Fred, we were going to the same middle school. It wasn't planned, but I thought it was cool to have an old friend in that place where I knew no one else the first day. Some assholes decided it would be fun to bully me for whatever reason, and what does Fred do? Defend me against these guys? No, he joins them. And they all continued bullying me for 3 years straight. It's been 8 years since I last heard about him, but if I ever see him again, the first thing he's gonna see is my fist on a high-speed collision course with his face being bullied is one thing, but being betrayed by someone you called a friend is unforgivable. Story 54. My father. Conceiving me was the last thing he did in our family. He walked out the next day. He essentially told her, "Do whatever you want with it." Me, I don't care. I blamed myself for him leaving all my life. And now I blame him for making me and making my mom a single mother of 4 kids. If he hadn't made me, things would have been easier for the rest of my family. I spoke to him for the first time in my life last year. I just wanted him to care, love me, hate me, anything. He had nothing. I really was nothing to him all this time. I never want to meet him. Nothing good would happen if I did. Story 55. Some twat who was my family's home wrecker. Just an overall Schmidt human being who needs to carry around a plant to make up for the waste of oxygen he is. Story 56. Personally, have always tried not hating, but remembering why I dislike a person. Hating on something or someone daily, even if justified, isn't ideal long-term for mental and physical health. The one person I dislike is probably my old middle high school bully. He was smug, always lying, a tattletale while saying, "Snitches get stitches." I still don't get how he had friends. If he didn't like you, you always had issues coming up. It was either your pen going missing, him biting his hand and blaming you, farting and blaming you, etc. At a certain point, he was moved to another class since everybody started hating him. And he found friends that, let's say, were always licking his ass. Story 57. There was a teacher in music school who touched my friend inappropriately. It was reported by a woman who overheard us talking about it. We were 16. The principal's solution was to march into her home with the teacher in question, sending her away so she can't say anything, and to talk some crap to her parents about how she made it all up. She's from a dysfunctional family, so her parents didn't really care. Again, she wasn't even the one to report it. In the end, my friend had to publicly apologize for doing nothing. I hate that principal and that teacher with a passion, because even at 16 I could see how terribly wrong that was, and nobody defended that girl. Story 58. This gold digger girlfriend of my uncle. I'll skip the long backstory, but my uncle is such a kind and sweet man, and she has him around her finger. She is a lazy piece of Schmidt, only sits on her ass all day. Looking pretty, I despise her. I'm not a violent person, but one time I came across her while holding my motorcycle helmet, and I had the urge of bashing her head in with it. I never experienced something like that before, but there is not much my family can do about it. My uncle is an adult, so the only thing we can do is keep warning him and trying to open his eyes. Story 59. The husband of my girlfriend's aunt that she lived with when she first came to America. Dude was in his 50s at the time, and forcibly groomed and sexually assaulted her, 19 at the time, for 6 months while she was in their care, emotionally scarring her for the foreseeable future. When it all blew up, the wife, her aunt, refused to believe it and simply accused her of having an affair with her husband, further scarring her. She refuses to tell me his last name because she knows if she does, I will find out where he lives and make the drive 2 hours away and end his pathetic existence in the most painful way I can dream of. Story 60. A former boss at the old computer repair shop I used to work at. He made fat jokes at me, belittled me, horrible communicator, so things got messed up, constantly at odds with people, had totally Schmitty mood swings, and one time jokingly threatened to stab me. Seemed like he was kidding, but what the duck? He went from, "what an idiot," to genuinely scary. I regret not getting in his face and telling him off. He needed it. One of the worst people I've ever met. Felt amazing when I finally quit. It's sad how the need for money will keep you in bad places. Story 61. My husband's sister was it for a long time. She was manipulative, narcissistic, and terrorized her parents with threats of suicide and screaming when she didn't get her way, or the attention wasn't focused on her. She would deliberately make herself injured when we would visit their part of the country so that her parents' focus would need to be on her. This was all when she was a grown adult in her 30s. She passed away a few years ago. I never felt more terrible for my in-laws, who loved her, of course, since she was their daughter. But it improved things for the entire family. And everyone, including my in-laws, knows it. Story 62? Honestly, my second ex. I invested too much time, effort, and money into our life and relationship, only for her to sit on her ass and do nothing with it. Couldn't leave the house and see friends. Couldn't do anything except work and see her and her friends. It was toxic as hell. It got to the point where she would threaten suicide every time I did anything that would upset her. I eventually broke my own morals and cheated on her, and was finally free from the spell. But in return, financially, psychologically, and romantically, I am forever damaged. Story 63. Ex-brother-in-law. Abusive, nearly killed my sister, continues to torment her through the court system 15 years later. He knows high-level politicians and has evaded multiple felony charges for violent behavior. You'd never know it, though. He lives in a giant house with a literal white picket fence. He's remarried, has a very successful business, goes to church every week, etc., etc. These are the most dangerous people. Chameleons. Story 64. My parents, especially my mom, she is my biggest bully. A jealous, drug-addicted narcissist who has always felt the need to belittle me in front of people to make herself feel better about her schmitty choices. She will pick at me long enough to force a reaction out of me and then act like I'm a crazy person for having emotions and reacting to her constant bullying. I will never know peace while my parents are on this earth. They made life hell for my little brother and me, and they pretend like they were the best parents ever. We didn't even have a bed in their house. Story 65. My ex. The sack of Schmidt gave me PTSD from all the abuse he put me through, and now my mental health is nuts. Had the indecency to email me, because I've blocked him from everywhere, to tell me that he's miserable and that he attends to therapy now because he's super depressed and that he can't forget me. I hope he rots in that depression and end up taking his life. He's that kind of monster that isn't going to change and make his victims the villains when he was the one who duck up their entire lives. Story 66. My mom. Ducked up my childhood. Now I'm super behind everyone else and fighting off depression while I learn basic skills. I went no contact a few years ago, and honestly, my life has done nothing but improve with her gone. Story 67. My best friend's wife turned an agnostic scientist into a knuckle-dragging evangelical Christian. It eventually ended our 25-year friendship. Story 68. Contractor. 3.5 years in court. We won. We got paid as we forced a sheriff's sale. He got a divorce, paid child support for 6 kids, got brain cancer, and died miserable, broke, and alone. He had $1 million in paid-up life insurance, terms of the divorce. All his kids went to college. His wife is having a great life with a new husband. She and my wife are now good friends. I got to watch the whole Schmidt show, and I regularly take a Gatorade bottle full of piss to his grave. I still hate that mother ducker. Story 69. My mom, while she was recovering from a perforated colon that almost killed her. The day they took her off morphine, my dad and I visited her after school, and she verbally ripped us apart for several hours. The cherry on top, though, was my brother calling her when he's 550 miles away and getting a complete 180. Nothing but a pleasant conversation and unwarranted compliments. As soon as her conversation ended, she turned to me and said, "He's my good son. He's the only good thing to come out of me." That was 2006, and I was 13 years old. Story 70. Hatred of myself aside, there are 2 in-laws that I would happily pop feet first into a meat grinder. Both are scum of the highest order. Narcissists that manipulate, lie, and deceive about everything. Story 71. I don't have the capacity to hate anyone anymore. I once had a roommate that skipped out on rent and left town. Almost got me evicted, and I had to cancel I was saving for. That sucked. I hated him for a while for it. I just don't really care about that stuff anymore, though. Hating him takes energy I don't feel like giving. Don't get me wrong. I'll take joy in his failures, but I'm not going to spend any time wishing he would fail, if that makes sense. Story 72. I don't like to use the word hate. It's more of a grudge. Cameron tried to get me fired after I reported him to his client for safety violations. Fortunately, my employer would hear none of that because part of my job was to promote safety. Cameron, I hope your life circumstances teach you a hard lesson. Story 73. These 3 girls that harassed me for 2 years called me some of the most disgusting Schmidt and got their boyfriend go threaten to beat me up. They'd be transphobic. Tell me to kill, how no one loved me, how I should get roped, and describe in great detail about the method I should use to kill. It came at a terrible time too because that's around when I was recovering from a failed suicide attempt. Doing a lot better now? I hope nothing but the worst for them. Story 74. My abuser. I wish nothing but the worst for him. I wish I didn't hold this much resentment towards him. I've tried to work through this in therapy, but I truly despise him. Story 75. My boss, because he constantly discriminates against my disability and then tries to make me do things in the hardest way possible for my disability, just so he can claim I did something wrong and write me up. He also harassed my friend for having cancer and then he fired her. She has a lawyer and is working on a lawsuit, which I really hope makes him finally lose his position of power because he's just a schoolyard bully who never grew up and he needs to go. Story 76. That asshole my mother brought into our home when I was 9 proceeded to abuse her physically for 3 years, and me being unable to do anything to help her get away from him, because to this day she denies any of it happened, and it was all just my child's perception. I remember him strangling her multiple times. I remember hiding in my closet and crying several times. I remember the police showing up at our house twice and taking him because he attacked her again. Story 77. I wouldn't say hate since I have to exert so much energy for that, but I would say deep indifference towards my ex. Realized he was a narcissist all along who was all forms of abusive except physical abuse. I lost myself trying to love him and saving the relationship from the hurt he caused in the first place, and continued to cause. That was ongoing for years, even though I expressed that I was in pain due to his actions, which had detrimental effects on my body. He couldn't care less. Never again. Story 78. An ex-best friend and their Schmitty partner. I confessed to them about the DV I was going through because I was scared and needed help. They acted empathetic, but apparently didn't believe me, and tried to out me to my abuser, putting me in mortal danger. I've forgiven a lot over my lifetime, like any other human, but I'll never forgive that, and I'll never forget it. I don't wish ill on anyone, but I can't say I'd be proud of my reaction if ill were to befall either of them. Story 79. When I was younger, it was easy to carry hate, but it's a hard emotion to keep alive. It fades with time. The exception would be for murderers, rapists, abusers, and politicians who get people killed in wars for no particular reason. Story 80. My ex-wife, Catherine, she cheated on me, illegally recorded me without my consent, and may even have tried to deliberately give me an STD so I wouldn't leave her. I found pills hidden under the medicine cabinet with some other dude's name on them. I think she was trying to have her affair partner's baby and pass it off as my own. Fortunately, I always used a condom when I slept with her, and I divorced her before she could pop out a kid. Story 81. I hate the new dad. Dad moving into dementia. Loved the previous dad. MAGA brainwashed my dad. I miss my old dad who was open to discourse and we helped each other. The polarization of politics tearing families apart is so very real. Story 82, the couple and realtor who sold me my house. They hid all kinds of problems, tens of thousands of dollars worth, ate up all of our savings, and the extra space we have from living in a condo is oddly empty because we can't afford to fill it with furniture. My realtor was just like Aunt Shih Tzu. The whole experience makes me hate realtors in general. Story 83, my ex. He abused me in every way. I got away and he and his mother stalked me for a year. The last time I saw him, he came into my work and smashed my head against a till. A random customer got involved and got him away from me. I think he genuinely saved my life that day. I'll forever be grateful for him. I now have a 10-year restraining order from him and he had to leave my town. Story 84, the sociopath. I seem to attract them as I have lots of empathy and I'm sensitive. The best thing to do is just forget about them as revenge is worse on you. Story 85, my father's wife. She's an awful person. Banned me from his funeral. Didn't even tell me he died. I found out days later from someone he used to work with, sick in the head, and would comment on my older sister's Facebook how she was his one and only, even though he also had me and my brother. Story 86. My brother. For over 25 years, I guess he just thought that it was okay that he made fun of me all the time. That being said, it's not entirely his fault. Our parents weren't around as much to guide us. And that's not entirely their fault either because they were working a lot, because they had to. The important thing is we're both making steps to move forward. Story 87. My stepfather. Treated my mom well and treated me with a raw disdain. Shattered all the confidence I had following my college graduation and placed my mom in the unfortunate position of having to quell our confrontations for years. I was happy to personally see him pass, yet I'm still seeking peace following the few years of his abuse. A cruel, lingering spirit that I'm slowly moving on from. Story 88. An ex-sexual partner and friend. We have a child. He thinks he can put her in dangerous situations and duck with her health. He can keep dragging out the court Schmidt. He can bankrupt me. I had never wished death upon someone until him. Now I know what true hatred feels like. I've always been a nice person, and I'm not sure if that's still the case. Story 89. I guess my ex-wife, even though I still love her, confusing I know, made me believe an affair she had 6 years ago was all in my head. Recently, truth came out, and it was during the time of conception for our daughter. And when I got the paternity test to prove she's mine, her first words were, "Well done. Do I get an apology now?" Story 90. My stepmother. When my dad died of cancer, she didn't tell me or my brother. She and my half-siblings cut all contact, sold up, and moved away. We missed attending his funeral, and to this day do not know the location of his grave or where his ashes were scattered. Rose, Lauren, and Mitchell, you are vile! Story 91. I grew up watching him beat my mother whenever he'd drink. He cheated multiple times, did hardcore drugs, was nearly violently homophobic to my brother. He got shot a few years ago. I laughed when I heard the news and was genuinely sad he lived. Duck you, Brian. You don't deserve the title Dad. Story 92. Ex-friend accused me of running away every time I tried to end our toxic friendship and then eventually abandoned me. When I reached out to a friend for support, the friend betrayed me and allowed for a 70-page Google Doc including all of my private screenshots with them to go out online. Story 93. My company commander when I was a cadet. He is rotting in prison right now. Serves him right, that piece of human-faced dog Schmidt. I hope he will never see the day outside of his prison cell. Story 94. I had a mutual friend that was buddies with my best friend. He's a goddamn liar. Like, imagine the person that you know that lies about everything and then times it by 10. Just lies beyond lies no matter what it is. He'll lie about it to his grave for no reason whatsoever. Story 95. Former employee, did all she could to get nothing done and blame others for the lack of work. Dragged me through several rounds of HR, and although her claims were baseless, each round of investigation took a bit of my soul. I hope she dies a horrible death. Story 96. Parents. Literally, the comment doesn't allow so many characters, and there's also a lot of stuff that I would never share. But yeah, ducked up life, like really, it's so ducked up that I'm afraid if I share all the things here, this would become viral through Reddit, Twitter, etc. Story 97. Putin. Killing civilians, kidnapping children, torture of children, bombing hospitals, destruction of an entire people. And that happens every day, every hour, every minute. Story 98. My father's sister and brother caused him a loss of at least $10 and ruined my family. Although jokes on them, their children and spouses left them, while my father died like a king with kids who wanted to die for him instead. Story 99. My mill. She caused so much damage to her son as a child, and we are only just beginning to unpack it all to try to heal him. She's not allowed to meet our children. Story 100. My parents, the most toxic and narcissist people I have ever seen, destroyed my sisters in my childhood and emotionally scarred us for the rest of our lives. And just not us, all of our relatives hate them too. Story 101. My ex-friend from school who turned into one of the popular kids and now talks about me behind my back to my friends and other people. He's a completely different person now. Story 102. I hate the Chicago public school system. My wife is a teacher. They constantly jerked her around, expected too much, but offered too little in return.